Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, it's time. We're going to talk about the only buff from C2 Xilonen that actually justifies going for that Constellation. Because I've said it before and I'll say it again, you don't need C2 Xilonen. You will be absolutely perfectly fine with C0 Xilonen, relax. But if you're going to pull for this Constellation, if you really want a strong reason to pull for this Constellation, this is it. The Electro buff. The buff that actively changes how Electro characters feel to play. Hello everyone, welcome back. Before we continue, I just want to remind you all to subscribe because this is going to be the second last in a series of videos about Xilonen in the C2 Xilonen mini arc, and the last video is going to be about a variety of teams that I've been enjoying where you can actually make use of most of Xilonen's buffs from her C2 because it's actually rainbow teams that really mix and match those buffs. So don't forget to hit that bell icon so you'll be notified of the next video on the channel, as well as other videos moving forward. Now, when Genshin Impact first came out, I was greeted by a character called Lisa. Right then and there, I realized that this was the woman for me. As the game has progressed, it has turned out that I ended up being a loud and proud Electro main. And it seems like whenever Electro mains get new tools, well, we are only given nothing but the best to ensure that we are able to have the most fun with our characters. C2 Xilonen is not just an exception, dare I say it's actually a prime example, the ultimate expression of what it means to be an Electro character. Because what is her Electro buff? Whenever you activate your Electro Source Sample, usually by EN2ing in the correct kind of team composition, every Electro character regenerates 25 energy instantly. And then on top of that, any active burst cooldowns get reduced by 6 seconds. Keep in mind, this buff is tied to Xilonen's skill, which itself has a 7-second cooldown, but it's not like the buff itself has any kind of crazy internal cooldown shenanigans, which basically means it basically has a 7-second cooldown. And if you're militant about it, you can actually use it quite a lot. So, what this means is that you can actually, I guess per rotation, get plus 50 energy and minus 12 seconds on burst cooldowns, which is actually kind of insane. On top of that, this actually works if you were to activate source samples through Night Soul transmission, which means in the overworld, in Natlan, there's some crazy shenanigans that you can do with this. Now, unlike the other buffs from C2 Xilonen, those are just simply stat increases. This buff just straight up changes how some characters feel to play. We're talking about faster rotations, dare I say lightning fast rotations, smoother gameplay loops, and also not having to worry about energy regeneration as much as you used to, which I suppose could be considered a stat increase because then you can take those ER rolls and put them into more offensive stats instead. As much as I enjoy doing big numbers, at the end of the day, I just much rather enjoy dynamic gameplay. That's just my personal opinion, and therefore this is why I believe the Electro buff from C2 Xilonen is actually the best one. So if you're an Electro main like me, dare I say, C2 Xilonen is almost a must pull. Almost. There are no such things as must pulls in this game. Do not ever, at any point in time, consider anything as a must pull in this game. But C2 Xilonen is, so worth it if you are in fact an Electro main, because you're not buffing your characters, you're buffing your enjoyment of the game.
Make yourselves at home. And to the chase. Hey! With sword comes shadow. Don't blink. Hey!
As you wish, main.
Nowhere to hide. Speed of light.
What I thought would be really prudent in this video would be to go through each and every Electro character and talk about how strong this effect is on them. Some characters will be massively affected and some characters will probably not care at all. So, let's start from the oldest and make our way to the newest. We'll start off with Lisa. Burst cost is 80. What this means is that if you do 2 EN2s from Xilonen per rotation, you're already battering more than half her ult. On top of that, you can therefore focus on using Lisa's tap skills instead of using her hold skill for damage, because that does end up being more damage against single targets at the very least. I think it also has a tiny AoE. Either way, you can actually use your lantern more often, which does mean more time having enemy defense reduced by her A4 passive, so that's really good. The cooldown of the lantern, by the way, is 20 seconds long, which may be reduced to effectively 8 seconds if you're super duper diligent. This does mean that double lantern is in fact an option. I have seen it, both overwhelmed by using phlogiston memes, but also I have tried it without using phlogiston memes. It is possible. Moving on, we have Razor, whose burst cost is also 80 with a cooldown of 20 seconds. By my understanding, the burst of Razor is what's important about his kit, so having that cooldown reduced is of course going to be really huge. As far as I can tell though, he's not quick swappable though, so it's not as great, I guess, because the interaction for this does end up getting limited by that. Moving on, we have Beidou. Beidou's burst cost is 80, cooldown is 20 seconds, famously a massively energy-hungry character in my opinion. With the exception of Cyno teams, I have always struggled to find a way to battery Beidou, especially because, well, Raido happens, you can't use Beidou with the Raiden Shogun, so there goes that idea as well. Now, as long as you keep her with C2 Xilonen, she's not actually that much of an energy-hungry person, which basically does open up a lot of additional teams that you can play with Beidou. Not Taser though. Well, I doubt you're going to bring Beidou, or rather I doubt you're going to bring Xilonen into a Taser team. But putting aside Taser, yeah, this is going to be something that's really good for Beidou. Next we're going to have Fischl, whose burst cost is 60 with a cooldown of 15 seconds. Ironically, not a whole lot changes for Fischl in my opinion, but I suppose you can actually forego using her skill now, because Oz at C6 sticks around for 12 seconds. With Xilonen at C2, just using one EN2 already reduces that burst cooldown to 9 seconds, which does mean you have 100% Oz uptime per burst. So that should be really good. As long as you have enough energy on Fischl, you should be a-okay. I suppose you could potentially save her skill for that odd moment when you don't have enough energy. So I guess that kind of changes things a little bit. Meanwhile, we have Keqing, whose burst cost is 40 with a cooldown of 12 seconds. Keqing is an absolute riot. If you have C2 Xilonen and you're a Keqing main, oh, it's crazy mode with her. Her energy regeneration is already more than half of Keqing's cost. So you don't even really need ER anymore, I guess. And on top of that, the cooldown reduction is actually half of her cooldown reduction, which means you can actually Omega spam Keqing's ult with absolute complete wanton destruction. Like, you don't even have to care at all. If you are a Keqing main, once again, I think Xilonen is almost a must pull for her. Then we're going to go on to Sara. Sara's burst cost is 80 with a cooldown of 20 seconds. Now, if you're only caring about support Sara, Xilonen's C2 isn't really going to do a whole lot because Sara's buffs are tied to her skill. Unless you're talking about Noblesse, in which case, yeah, sure. You suddenly have Noblesse going from a 60% uptime to an 80%, 85% uptime. So that's actually pretty nice. Meanwhile, for the DPS Sara players, you know, your EOSF nukers, obviously more ults equal more damage, so that's pretty good as well. At the end of the day, though, if you are playing Sara, yeah, it's not going to be a huge amount for the most part, but yeah, it's something you can use. Now we're going to move on to the almighty Narukami Ogosho, God of Thunder, the Raiden Shogun A herself. Her burst cost is 90 with a cooldown of 18 seconds. Now, A is famously the battery Archon, so the energy regeneration part of C2 Xilonen is largely irrelevant, but it can still be useful in the grand scheme of things. The cooldown reduction may be nice though if you want to play some super duper fast rotations, so there is that. At the end of the day though, I think the main effect of getting C2 Xilonen on A is actually that Xilonen can now take over some of the roles that A normally would take over, which is battering the entire team. Well, in some teams, mainly Electro teams, mainly the Inquisition, A is not necessarily the one who's battering the entire team too much now. Xilonen can kind of do that. So if you want the additional support capabilities of Xilonen over the crazy damage of A, well then there's a little bit of role cannibalization with that. Meanwhile, we have the illustrious Yae Miko, the wise and beautiful. Her burst cost is 90 with a cooldown of 22 seconds. The energy regeneration is actually really nice if you have C1 Miko. So when you pair those two together, you get 24 energy from C1 Miko, provided you have 3 totems out before you use her ult. And then on top of that, you also can use one EN2, for example. You pair them together, you already have 49 out of the 90 energy refunded right then and there, so that's really good. The cooldown is also reduced to 16 seconds. Now, I do want to remind everyone that Miko's turret duration is 14 seconds. What does that mean? It means if you're really diligent about it, you can actually fit in another EN2 on the remaining 16 seconds of that cooldown to basically make it an effective 10-second cooldown, and that actually means that turrets have a full uptime per ult. Meaning that you don't really have to regularly right here, right now emerge anymore. You can actually just ult right here, right now emerge, EN2 twice, and then ult again, right here, right now emerge. So I suppose if that's the kind of Miko gameplay that you're really interested in, oh yeah, C2 Xilonen is going to be absolutely amazing. Otherwise, it's not going to make a huge deal in that regard, with regards to like turret uptime and all that jazz, since Miko's turrets already have like 100% uptime per skill, at least, so that's really, really good. Now we're going to talk about Shinobu, whose burst cost is 60 with a cooldown of 15 seconds. Now, putting aside how you would probably never bring Xilonen to a Hyperbloom team, C2 Xilonen doesn't really change anything anyway, because in those teams, in most of Shinobu's teams, it's her skill that matters. Her ult is largely irrelevant from my understanding. That being said though, if you want to play DPS Shinobu, sure, C2 Xilonen means you get to ult more often. That should be pretty nice. And then we're going to look at the other Electro healer, Dori. Now, Dori's burst cost is 80 with a cooldown of 20 seconds. Unlike Shinobu, the Constellation actually can allow you to play a different form of Dori a lot more easily, and that is Dori Omega Hyperbloom Trigger, which requires a team that produces a ton of seeds. So mainly Nahida, Tortellini, and Dori, for example. This is a team where normally you'd need quite a lot of ER on Dori. With C2 Xilonen, suddenly you don't. So that's, of course, going to be really, really nice. So either way, I could potentially see some value in some of Dori's teams. When it comes to the main Dori team that I play, which is Thundering Dori's Raid Squad, yeah, this really ain't going to be it, Chief. Now we're going to move on to Cyno, who has a burst cost of 80 and a cooldown of 20 seconds. Now, sometimes in Spiral Abyss, we screw up and we end up starting a change move with no energy on Cyno. And I can tell you from personal gameplay experience, battering Cyno from scratch is absolutely god-awful. So having C2 Xilonen is suddenly a huge boon for that. On top of that, we're also able to ensure, let's say, the other Electro character, Beidou, actually has enough energy to start the next rotation. Although in a Cyno team, that's never really a huge problem, so I suppose that's not going to be that different in that grand scheme of things. Either way, though, it does make things a lot smoother, but if you're going to play like a team with 2 Electros, then you end up losing Hyperblooms usually. So I suppose you could play Aggravate Cyno with Red Shred, or you could play Quick Bloom Cyno with Red Shred. It's entirely up to you. Now we're going to look at Clorinde, who has a burst cost of 60 and a cooldown of 15 seconds. Now, generally speaking, the vast majority of Clorinde's damage does come from her guns and lunge. So, you know, it's not going to be a gigantic boon to your overall gameplay experience. Some people, like myself, who play Thundering Fury Clorinde, don't really use our ult that much, especially if the downtime is used simply just to refresh Sara's buff, for example. However, the ult can still do some pretty decent damage, especially if you play with Iansan, or if you're really, really diligent with your Sara gameplay. So I suppose being able to ult more often with Clorinde is actually not a bad idea at all. It does mean you can also start each Clorinde rotation with, I suppose, guaranteed some Bond of Life for that additional crit rate buff from her A4 passive. So there is that, but either way, the main reason that I like having C2 Xilonen with Clorinde is so that I can definitely end all fights cinematically, which in my opinion is much more important. The main advantage though with Xilonen C2 is actually for whoever else you bring on the team, let's say Iansan, because I'll talk about Iansan in a second, but it does make her significantly more easier to use with Clorinde. Or potentially Sara, so that you can do more damage per rotation by popping Sara's ult more often. Now we're going to move on to Sethos. Now, Sethos has a burst cooldown of 15 seconds at a cost of 60. But I'm not going to pretend to be a Sethos expert in any way, shape or form. I suspect Sethos players though, they tend to be focusing more on that special charge attack that uses his energy to quick draw and do more damage and also have punch through. So that plus 25%, or rather that plus 25 energy from Xilonen is actually enough for one fully drawn special charge attack. However, if you use his skill to trigger a reaction and then collect the particles from his skill as well and use EN2, in my experience, you seem to have enough energy for at least 3 fully drawn special charge attacks. So that's kind of nice. Both characters seem to have very similar cooldowns though on their skill, 7 seconds versus 8 seconds. So that plus 3 fully drawn charge attacks seems to be the usual gameplay experience with me, thus turning Sethos into basically 4-star Electro Stignari. Or you can pop his ult and just start doing more N2 Ws. I guess it's entirely up to you. Either way, with the very limited and very basic gameplay experience that I've had with Sethos so far, I like C2 Xilonen with him quite a lot. So yeah, Sethos Mains. Let me know in the comments if you've actually had some better experience with this. Moving on, we have Ororon, whose burst cost is 60 with a cooldown of 15 seconds. Is Ororon's ult even relevant? I don't know. I mean, personally, I just hyper-focus on his A1 passive for damage and just move on with my life. But I guess if you have built Ororon's ult, then sure, you can use his ult more often. Great. Meanwhile, we have Varesa, whose burst cost is 70 and a cooldown of 18 seconds. Except that's not the burst you actually care about, is it, folks? No. The one that you really care about is her special burst that has a cost of 30 and has no cooldown. It's just basically tied to when you get the special state that Varesa gets into with her mask on. The main advantage of C2 Xilonen is ensuring that you will always have enough energy to do her special burst, even if you need to start from scratch, because 25 energy is already getting you really close, and with a lot of Varesa teams, Iansan is usually part of it, which means you should be able to have enough energy right before you even start popping off with Varesa. Varesa is also very quick swappable as well, which means if you somehow run out of energy for your second one, then you can just quickly swap over the Xilonen for another EN2, which then batteries Varesa, and you can go again. So the onslaught can in fact continue. You couple this with the +1 stack of Varesa's A4 passive, which gives her another 35% attack that's only obtainable from Shilonen's special extra Night Soul burst interaction that I talked about previously. I really like C2 Xilonen with Varesa. And finally, we have Iansan, who has a burst cost of 70 and a cooldown of 18 seconds. The cooldown reduction actually lines up the duration of the ult to have more than 100% uptime, but your real cooldown is still going to end up being 16 seconds anyway, because you'll usually want to skill into ult, so yeah, you're kind of losing a bit of value from Shilonen's C2 in that regard, but at least you won't have to accidentally skill into waiting for your ult cooldown to come back before you then ult, so that's really nice. On top of that, Iansan is, in my opinion, famously massively ER required for the most part. Now she... Is it? That does mean that it's a lot easier to use weapons that are not named the Torch or Favge, and one such weapon that I'm very excited to try out with Iansan, I'm actually going to go for it, is Escoffier's signature spear, because that actually makes Iansan power creep a killer missplit embedded. I did the math. It's actually true. Speaking of Bennett, nobody cares. For most Electro characters, the Electro buff is really useful. So now let's have a look at a couple of teams that I've been really enjoying with C2 Xilonen. So I want to have a look at two teams in particular that I've been really enjoying with C2 Xilonen and how she's now massively affecting them in some terrific and hilarious ways. The first team is going to be International. Now this is of course a very quick swappy team, so the gameplay basically ends up ensuring Miko's turrets are active, ensuring the Heater's tag is active, as well as making sure the Temple of Wisdom is out, the on-fielding of Lisa as much as possible, as well as getting her lantern out as well as periodically swapping back to Xilonen to reactivate the source samples. Now, whenever I see a logo pop up on the right hand side of the screen, that's basically time to pop Miko's ult or drop Lisa's lantern. That's pretty much it. Rotations are a hilarious concept created by the theory crafting community that doesn't actually exist in this team. This is 100,000% a random bullshit go kind of team. Meanwhile, we also have the Raiden Inquisition. Now, previously this team didn't have a particularly fast rotation because of how long some of these cooldowns were, but with C2 Xilonen, we can now have super duper tight 20-second rotations, for example. Assuming a skill is already active, we're talking about going from Miko's turrets into Xilonen EN2, into Sara's skill and ult, into Miko's ult and turrets, into Sara charge attack, into A popping off and going crazy for a little bit of time, usually enough time to pop one charge attack and maybe 3 normal attacks or something like that. Basically enough until I see that Shilonen's ult is ready to go, so then Xilonen EN2 plus ult, Sara skilled ult, Miko ult, maybe with one extra turret placement before we actually pop that ult so that we can kind of ensure that we have the triple turret ult shenanigans going on, and then Xilonen EN2, rinse and repeat. This is a very, very tight rotation. It can be tricky to play, but when I do it well, I feel like I'm playing extreme try-hard mode. So in the right mental state, yeah, this is actually quite a lot of fun. So either way, having Xilonen in these teams does end up being just really, really nice in keeping the team either faster or a lot smoother.
Where evil lurks, shoot on sight. Let's... Hey! Hunt them down.
So that's what the best C2 Xilonen buff is all about. Rapid fire ults. Oh, we do love that. Or in the case of some characters, more energy to do some other cool stuff. I hope Hoyo leads into some more kit designs that exist in the game, like Sethos, that gives us more alternative ways to manage that energy. We're already seeing something like that with Varesa, so that's really, really cool. Meanwhile, C2 Xilonen does end up, of course, being an abundance of energy, so that can really augment how they feel to play, because at the end of the day, she's not a stat increase, although you can now move some of her ER rolls into some offensive stats. She's a genuine improvement in the gameplay experience and how fun Electro characters can be. Let me know if you got all of us in the comments below. Who is your favorite Electro character to use with Xilonen? And what is your favorite Electro team to use with C2 Xilonen? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you liked this video, hit that like button, subscribe for more Genshin Impact action. And until next time, I'll see you guys later. Thanks for watching. Bye.
Sparkly. Right now. I see everything. I'm always watching. Right here. Oh my god! The Temple of Wisdom!